thank you guys. Thank you guys for popping in with me. I am more than excited to be with you on January 4th of this brand new year. 2024, we made it to another year, and I'm so completely grateful. Grateful for just being able to make it to another year. Life, my loved ones, safe and sound, making it to another year. I don't take that for granted at all. God's grace and God's mercy. So I'm grateful, and I'm grateful to be on back with you guys, having the conversations like we usually normatively do. So at the top of the podcast, you guys know, if you have come to my show, my Forever Friends Academy episodes before, that I always start with a question. That's what the Q&A stands for. The Q&A stands for a quote that I put out at the top of the podcast, and then I ask a question, and then, of course, we discuss the answer based on some of the fundamental principles that I have thankfully learned, not just through my relationships, but also the principles that I offer the clients that I have, whether it's my private clientele or through my group coaching. So today's quote is really, really, really precious to me and special. And the quote goes like this. It basically says, "Why wish to be good enough when God made you just right?" And I'll say it again. Why wish to be good enough when God made you just right? And it's one of those quotes, one of those statements that came fresh off of heaven's press. That's what I like to call it, when divine inspiration hits and you get something that, honestly, at least for me, I could have not, with my own knowledge or intelligence, could have come up with in that way. So I feel like it's like a drop of heaven when you get those ideas or in those statements that really ring true, at least to me, and is articulated in such a way that it's undeniable. So that quote is resonates in that way to me. So that is the quote for tonight. Let me know what your thoughts are. Let me know if it's something that you feel like if you put at the center of your relationships, it would be something that would be beneficial to it and help you grow through the good and the bad times, etc. Let me know. So I'm waiting to see if I hear some comments back from you guys. I'm hoping that the live for Instagram is going to come up, and I could be able to see if you guys are on here commenting with me. I'm trying to pull it up here, and I don't see it for some reason. So I'm going to wait, though, give it a moment to see if I get any feedback from you guys before I let you know what that quote means. And while I'm waiting, I also will throw out tonight's question that kind of goes along with that quote. And tonight's question is basically, do you think that when you are, navigating, developing relationships, and eventually, if this is something that you want to elevate into marriage and a committed relationship, do you think that you should be searching, or should we be searching to find the perfect relationship? Or should we, let me put it like this. Should we find the perfect relationship? And do you think we are settling if we find ourselves in a good enough relationship dynamic? So hopefully, let me restate that again, just so you guys can make sure it's clear for you guys. So the question for tonight is, should we look for the perfect relationship? And are we settling if we find ourselves in a good enough relationship dynamic? Should we be searching for a perfect relationship? And are we settling if we find ourselves in a good enough relationship dynamic? So that is the question for tonight. And the top of the podcast, the quote was, why wish to be good enough when God made you just right? So I'm going to give it a moment, breather, and see if I get some of you guys on with me. And I really hope that I'm not missing any comments that I can't see. Okay. Hey, Corey. I see your comment, but for some reason, it's not popping up on my feed outside of my phone. And that's what my concern is. But I see you on Facebook. Hey, how you doing? Thank you for joining me. But I don't know why it's not coming up on the other feeds. So that definitely is a problem because I want to be able to engage with you guys. And thankfully, I can see it on Facebook, but for some reason, it's not coming up on Instagram. But thank you for letting me know you can hear me loud and clear. Yeah, I have no idea why it's not coming up on Instagram. Okay, so yeah, I think that's, I think that's Corey giving me a thumbs up, I think. Thank you, Corey. If it's not, I'm so sorry. Whoever gave me the thumbs up. Thank you. So yeah, I'm just going to give it a moment, see if I can get some feedback from you guys. I don't know if you were here, Corey, but I put out a quote at the top of the podcast, and the quote is, why wish to be good enough when God made you just right? Why wish to be good enough when God made you just right? And the question for tonight is, when we are navigating, developing our relationships, especially when it comes to taking it to the next level of marriage or being a committed relationship, should we be searching for a perfect relationship? And are we settling if we have a good enough relationship dynamic? So that's the question for tonight. That is the quote for tonight. And so I'm going to wait and see. I can see your comments on Facebook, but I'm so sorry tonight, Instagram, that I don't know why it's not popping up for me. Well, I got no thumbs up. Thank you, guys. So that's the question for tonight and the quote. So as far as the quote, let me know if it's something that you feel like has some principles that you can kind of extract from it, that you find applicable to your relationship, whether it's your relationship with God, the creator, your relationship with your friends, your relationship with your business partner, coworkers, and of course, in an intimate sense, such as marriage. Let me know if you feel like that quote is something that resonates with you. If you keep it at the center of your relationship, if you keep it on your mind, that it's something that you feel like, would be very useful for your relationship. And let me know what your thoughts are on finding a perfect relationship, and if you know, do you consider settling if you feel like you're in a good enough relationship dynamic? All right, so I'm going to continue. I don't see any comments just yet, and I so apologize again if you are commenting specifically on Instagram and I can't see your comments tonight. I think what I might do, maybe I might do this. I might, because I was thinking maybe end it and then come back on Instagram. I might do that so that I can, be able to see you guys if you guys are talking to me. But for those of you on Twitch and Facebook and YouTube, let me know what your thoughts are. I can see you guys' comments. And I wanted to bring this up because we are at the top of the year. And, at the top of the year, many of us, including myself, we like to take the opportunity to use the fact that in a certain area, I don't want to say all over the world because not everybody looks at it in the same way, but I definitely know in American culture, it's good to take advantage when there are communities and societies as a whole that are looking at a certain season of life in the same way. I think it gives you and affords you the opportunity when everybody kind of is, not everyone, but a large group of people are wanting to use this moment in life, a new year, as kind of like a new beginning, a reset. A lot of us make certain goals and plans for the new year as far as how we want it to, go and use it to our most, maximum benefit and have the most optimal experiences. And it's great when you have, again, a large amount of people who are thinking the same way. I feel like it gives you a good support system, rather than if you felt like you were all alone in it. And so this quote is really precious to me because there are so many times I know in my personal process of growth where there were times that I second guessed whether I was good enough, to do something. A lot of mine came from not so much in a relationship sense, but definitely in me pursuing my dreams, my talents, my skill sets, and things like that. There were many times that I had conversations within myself, where the whole dialogue would be, I wish I was good enough, or am I good enough? And so when this quote came to me, and this quote, I thought of it because I'm working on my third book. It's called Just Right and In Position. And this is basically, I don't want to call it the tag phrase, but the truthful principle that is kind of the guiding or at the core message of the book, which is why wish to be good enough when God made you just right. And I wanted to examine tonight, especially for the question that I presented to you guys, should we be searching for the perfect relationship, and are we settling if we're in a good enough relationship dynamic? I wanted to kind of look at the nuanced differences when it comes to good enough and just right? Those two terminologies, and of course, look at what perfect and perfection is in a relationship, because then I think it'll give us a good angle to not only be able to kind of decipher when we're talking about getting into intimate relationships, or even in the friendships that we keep, if these are people that are right for us, if these are people that, are people who can grow with us through time. So that's what we're going to be talking about tonight. And let me see if I missed any comment before I continue. Okay, hey, Brene, how are you? And I see my auntie Sharon. Hey, guys. I'm so sorry. It should be coming up right on my screen. So I shouldn't really have to look down, but it is what it is today. But thank you guys for popping in. I don't know if you're still here, but thank you guys for popping in with me. Okay. All right. So, no, I don't see any comments yet. So, I'm just going to go and hopefully, I'm so sorry, guys. Hopefully, on the replay, I'll be able to see the comments that were left. Hopefully. But all right, so getting into, of course, my answer for that question, should we be searching for the perfect relationship? And are we settling if we get into a good enough relationship dynamic? So no, for the first part, we shouldn't be searching for a perfect relationship because we know we're flawed human beings. I think that's a real great part of the beauty of life, is finding your strength in some of the weaknesses that we have, and being able to see the beauty. There's an art, and I can't recall the name right now, and I'm not sure if it's a Chinese art or a Japanese art, but it basically is an art where they take broken items and they piece them together, but they use like gold to literally highlight the parts of the item that was broken. And they create this just beautiful artwork out of it. And I love that because I think, and a lot of times in life, when we think about our flaws or our weaknesses, sometimes we're trying so hard to hide them. We're defining ourselves by them. And it's a part of the natural process of life, and why we have relationships and why we work interdependently with others, because some of our weaknesses are strengths for others, and that's how we work collectively together. So it's not even something that should be judged or demeaned necessarily. Now, of course, if you are someone who is a menace to society because there are certain things that emotional management and physical aggression or things like that can't be appropriated. Now that's a different story, right? And even in that, right, you would find some therapists and some psychologists that would say, that person still is in need of rehabilitation, right? Because everybody has a backstory and everybody has certain steps or certain things of why they have interpreted life and responded to life in certain ways. So definitely not looking, we don't need to look for the perfect relationship, because there's no such thing, right? Even in the best relationship, even in the greatest relationship, there are dynamics that aren't perfect to it. And I think if life was perfect, it wouldn't be as interesting as it is, and we wouldn't, call on God as much if things were just this linear, perfect type of experience. So no to the first part. And actually, I think it's also yes to the second part, where if we find ourselves in a good enough situation, are we settling? And the reason why I say that is because I'm thinking of a quote, and I forget who the author of the quote is, and I'll look it up and put it, because I like to give people their flowers and their due, praise for being able to get an idea and be able to articulate it in a way where it can impact people. So the quote says that if good enough was actually good enough, then there would leave no room for greatness. And so when we're talking about in a good enough type of relationship dynamic, I don't think we ever really, strive to be good enough for anything. And I'm not saying that maybe it has never crossed your mind, or you haven't, went through the process where, like I said in the beginning, for me in a certain area, specifically when it came to either my singing abilities or I used to do acting. I used to go on these auditions, and, that conversation would come inwardly to myself, whether I felt like I was good enough. But I remember writing an article. It's on my Forever Friends Academy website if you ever want to check it out. It's called Why You Should Embrace Not Being Good Enough. And in the article, I say that if you really could kind of come out of yourself and just imagine you're talking to a friend, and that friend starts to, express to you in their vulnerability, I wish I wasn't good enough. Let's just make, maybe it's a man, and he says, I wish I was a good enough husband. I wish I was a good enough, I don't know, employee or CEO. I wish I was a good enough father. And when you hear that, it's like, I don't think anybody really ever wishes to be good enough for something, like just good enough for something. It kind of reminds me of a saying of doing what you can, but not necessarily what you love or what your purpose to do or what you're passionate about, or, you're just doing what you can. You're doing what you can, but it's not fueled by an intuitive drive. And so when I think about the latter part of that question that I asked, are you settling if you find yourself in a good enough relationship dynamic? I do think so. And I think when, at least for me, to assess the process, when times in the past when it came to me, whenever I had a conversation about whether I felt I was good enough for something or to do something, it came with, of course, the comparisons of my good qualities and whatever I deem to be, my weak qualities, and trying to like have some kind of balance out between them to say, okay, well, these good qualities overcast these weak. So now that makes me good enough. I don't think that when the drive is comparison, even if it's comparison within yourself, that is going to be as impactful or effective to where you get to a point where this is like, okay, I'm going to constantly kind of boldly go out there and do what I know that I'm purposed to do, because it's more calculative and there's no way to... All I can think of is that it's more calculative, it's more comparative, and it's not based on what is intuitively necessarily inside of you. Whereas with the quote that I presented at the beginning, why wish to be good enough when God makes you just right? When you're thinking of something that's just right, and I think many of us have had situations and experiences where, things just seem to fall right in place, right? Maybe some of us might call it a deja vu situation, where you're like, oh my goodness, I feel like I was here before. It's like all the stars align, everything is set in its right place. And it just everything feels like it's in proper alignment. And I think when we're thinking about the difference between good enough and just right, when I think of just right, there are two examples that I usually use, whether it's in a coaching session or talking to a private client. Really two simple examples that I love because it makes it really, really clear. Is one I heard because I have a son, and he was in school. I homeschooled them, so he was in school, and one of his teachers, he was learning in science that the Earth is the just right planet for humans. And I was just like, wow, it took me, kind of off guard because I've never heard that before. And also I was in the process. I had just gotten the title for the third book that I'm working on, which is Just Right and In Position. So I definitely, my ears kind of perked up and leaned over to listen some more. And they just began to explain that, it's the just right planet because it's the perfect weather, the atmosphere that protects us, and basically that it is conducive enough for human beings to survive on this planet, and not only survive, but also thrive. And I started to think about that, and I was just like, wow. Okay. And then I began to think about all the different inclement weather that we experience here, and natural disasters that we experience here, like tornadoes and hurricanes and, et cetera. And I thought even the more fitting for them to explain it that way. And then I started to think about it in the context of relationships that, you meet someone, and when you are trying to kind of assess if that person is just right for you or if you're just right for them, the first thing that has to be assessed is what your purpose is, right? Or who you are, what your how you're here to serve, right? So that is going to come from what your gifts are, what your talents are, what your personality is like, and things like that. And so you have to kind of like take time and assess and delight in that discovery. You have to delight in discovering yourself before you can expect someone else to delight in that discovery process. And I know I think in thinking about whether you're good enough for something, sometimes it prohibits that. Because, right, the doubt and insecurity and the, constantly comparing causes that. Whereas when you are thinking about something that's just right for you, you're thinking about all of, right, the ways that you are, it's like an intuitive type of navigating relationships or intuitive judgment of who you are and, right, how you're best, complimenting the person that you're with. And when going back to what they were saying about Earth being the just right planet and thinking about all the natural disasters and things that happen, and it's still being the just right planet for us, because even though these things happen, we're still able to continue on. And, I just thought about relationships. It's true, right? My husband's not perfect. I'm not perfect, but he is the just right person for me to go through the storms of life with and still grow and become stronger, and even grow to know myself better than me navigating, this life alone. So that's the first example that I think of when trying to kind of explain the difference between something being just right for you or something being good enough or seeking for perfection in a relationship. The other example is another elementary example. I'm sure, some of you, especially those of you who have kids, might have, read, maybe got it from the library or purchased the book, Goldilocks and the Three Bears, right? And so many of us know that story, right? That I always say, I don't know why this little girl was going into this bear's house, but nonetheless, the story is she goes into the house, right? And, she's taste testing the different porridges that are there. And, she falls upon the baby bear's one and it's just right for her, right? Maybe the other one is too hot, etc. But that's also another example that I think of, very simple. But if you put it back into the context of of relationships, and we know that when it comes to relationships, I say it all the time here on this show, is that there are people who want to love, people who need to love, people who want to love, people who choose to love, and people who have the capacity to love. So that's another way that you can think of the difference between something being good enough, something being just right, or something being perfect. When you are thinking about something being just right, or a relationship scenario that's being just right, it's measuring, right, based on the process that we just talked about. It's an intuitive type of judgment that can only you can only be able to kind of identify and assess it if you've taken out that time, right, within yourself to discover who you are and all the ways that you can show up in this world, right? And that's not like a one moment type of process. We all know it's a continual process, but I think it's more so of the angle of delighting in the process of doing that, rather than it being, I have to look at this so that I can calculate what I can achieve later. It's more of, okay, where you have the quote where it says life is, a journey, not a destination, because it's a reminder for us to delight in the process here, because we all have a beginning date and we all have an end date, but it's what's, what we do in the middle of that process, that where we get those lessons and the gems, and be able to impact those who we're supposed to impact. So when we're thinking about just right, we know that we've gone beyond just wanting to love and maybe just being enthused or enthralled with the idea of what that is, whether it's the emotions and the feelings that go along with it, but not really knowing the depth of it in people, or even it could be someone who wants to, but they're just so fearful because of things that have happened to them in the past. So they just cancel themselves out altogether. Or the person who chooses to love, who dives in, but because they might not have taken the time out to learn the character of love or the nature of love, or to understand the dynamics of relationships, or see if there are any kind of guiding principles that would help, aid them in the process, since it's such a big process of life, then, they don't get the maximum experience out of it. And then there are people who they develop the capacity to love, right? Because they're the people who are weathering those tsunamis, they're weathering the tornadoes, they're weathering all the different unpredictable, curveballs that life can bring us. And they're still staying steadfast. They're holding to the vows that they made unto God and to themselves, and to those who they feel like they are stewards over, or who they feel that they've been gifted to be a part of their life. And so that's the difference between something that's just right, something that is good enough, or something that's perfect. And I think the ping pong, at least I know in my experience, that has happened to me in processing, what we're talking about tonight, is that it's like one spectrum where you're aiming to be perfect, or you might not want to. And I don't want to say or, I will say it shows up in many different ways, right? If you're seeking for perfection, and and we know this in our mind, right? Not to do this, but it's so easy to kind of still fall into it. Because I just think of when you're in a relationship and say your partner hasn't done something that in the way that you wanted them to do, and that very moment, you're kind of forgetting, like, okay, well, I'm not perfect either. I'm not perfect either if there are things that are happening in the relationship, and maybe there's a partner who doesn't want to fight, who doesn't want to put effort or things in the relationship. And, those are moments where we forget that, we also are flawed in some areas. It might not be the area that we're looking at that we would like our partner to fix. But in our own process, we have our own things. So I think in just thinking about it that way, or we can sometimes get so attached to perfection, doing something perfect, that it'll cause us not to do it altogether, right? That many people right now could be experiencing or enjoying even just the process of maybe going into the waters and navigating, whether it's maybe they've been in a relationship, it didn't work out, they got hurt, or they've been through a divorce, etc., and they might not want to go through, right, the process again. And unfortunately, that idea of not wanting to take a risk can prohibit them from experiencing something that could be totally different or totally new. And I think of me with this podcast, I just had technical difficulties today with the sound and things like that. And when I listen back, I don't always, I listen to how many and rights and different things that I say and that I want to take out, or if I feel like I critiqued myself and I didn't articulate it in the best way that I thought possible, all these things, but I'm going to still do it, even if it's not perfect. Why? Because I know I'm born to do it. And I know that the people who these words or my presence needs to reach, they're not going to get it unless I put my foot forward, regardless if I think, I'm in the perfect place to be able to do it, or if I do it perfectly throughout. And then I also miss out on what me going on the adventure of pursuing what I do so wholeheartedly believe God has inspired and endorsed me to do. I miss out on that lesson, and I don't want to miss out on it. I don't want to miss out on that blessing. So you do it, even if you don't feel like you're in the perfect place to do it, and you do it scared, and you do it with courage. So we want to kind of stop the ping pong between, striving to be perfect or looking for the most perfect situation, and then, right, have the pendulum swing to, I wish I was good enough. They kind of correlate anyway, right? Because sometimes when you have that conversation of wishing to be good enough, it's because there is this comparison in our minds, and maybe there's this imaginary bar that we have that we want to reach. So it kind of, both of them fuel into each other, So that's why I absolutely love that quote. And if you could take anything away from tonight, it would be I hope that you can keep that in your heart and your mind, especially for the new year that we're in, that, I wish to be good enough when God made you just right. In the book that I'm working on, in the book, I state that, when God creates everything, he puts it in the just right position, right? Every detail is thought out meticulously for a reason, because, if certain things are off balance, and it offsets everything. So everything was tailor made. And once it's put in its position, because God knows it has the power and the fortitude to serve how it's supposed to, based on, right, its intrinsic features and nature. And I think that's us, right? We have certain intrinsic personality, character, and nature about ourselves that will allow us to thrive in certain areas of life and certain expertise. And once we kind of know that, then we can continue, right, to navigate this life looking for the just right relationships and the just right experiences. And I think just to kind of round and close this conversation off, there's one thing that I usually say to my clients in my group session, and I always say it to myself too, because it's necessary, is that, I think there's two processes that I don't, at least I will say, I think everyone who navigates this life will have the opportunity to embrace. I don't know if everyone takes it, but I know that the opportunity is presented. And so there's two experiences that I think in life that we all get the opportunity to kind of go through this process. And the first process is to, again, delight in discovering who you are, who God made you to be, and finding just beauty in that process. And I say delight a lot, because a lot of times when we're navigating and moving, sometimes it's from a place of desire, and the desire comes from just a constant reaching out, and it makes you feel like you're lacking something, and it makes you start to think like, oh, I'm not good enough. But when you come from a place of delight in exploring who you are, or just exploring what you're here to do, there's no lack in it. It is just literally like, okay, I'm loving this exploration. The best two examples that I can give you is one, when I started my forever friendship with my husband, which I kind of call it forever friendship. Now, we used to call it Christian companions when we were in high school. But it wasn't something forced. We just naturally kind of were drawn to each other. And when we would hang out, it would just be so delightful. It wasn't like, oh, I had this, and people, when I say this, people are like, oh, that sounds pretty, that sounds pretty boring, but it's actually the total opposite, it's because I say I didn't have like this desire for him. But the only reason why I didn't have that desire is because the relationship was so wholesome and it had so much depth that it just was like almost a constant, like instead of a well where you have to kind of dip in and then take the water and sip from it. It felt like just a ever, lasting spring or a waterfall, right? So it was so fulfilling that there weren't really parts where it was like, oh, I desire him from a place of where it's like a lack. It's like, no, I am receiving him fully and really enjoying the embracing of that process and the connectivity and the alignment of both of us being aligned in God's love. And the second example that I can give you guys is I used to, acting is really my first love. Instead of like singing and the coaching that came later on in life, just out of God's kind of, calling. But acting was really my first love. And I went to college and I majored in the arts, but then I ended up majoring in communication studies because you have, people in your family that say, get a real degree, honey, get a real degree. You're not going to make, money in the arts. You have to have a, backup plan that's more secure. And so I did communication studies because I would still have to dive into being in front of an audience. I would still have to learn about articulation and things like that, things that were kind of akin to when you're on stage and, singing and things like that. So to make a long story short, I, pursued even after I graduated with my communication studies degree, I still was like, I want to pursue what I feel like I'm here to do. And so I did, and my husband supported me and things like that. And I would go on auditions and things like that. But mind you, by the time I would go on these auditions, I was already married. I had already had my house. So basically the auditions that I would go on, the people who were in the auditions with me, the things that they were striving for, I had already had. I had already, by the grace of God, had acquired and achieved in life. And I remember, I think one of the auditions I went on and, because of me doubting myself, I didn't feel like I did the best that I could have. And I remember I came home to my husband and I talked to him about it. And he was like, Sharla, you're going into these auditions, for lack of better words. He didn't say this, but this is how I interpreted it when he said, like, you don't have a pot to piss in. You know what I mean? That's a very old saying. I don't know if, but it's like you are going in there as if you don't have that reality. Like a lot of the things that a lot of the people who are, pursuing this, they're doing it to get or to arrive at a point that you've already arrived at. So you should be going in there with a whole nother boldness and certainty because of the way that God has already blessed your life. And I just was like, oh, that's so true. That's so true. And that's not what I was doing, So it helped to kind of appropriate me. It helped to appropriate me because I realized in that moment that I was going after those dreams. I was going after it with the desire instead of the delight from the space that I was already in. And it always reminds me of the story of Eve in the Bible, where her and Adam are literally, where God is walking amongst them and talking in the cool of the day. And here comes, right, the serpent able to whisper in her ear to desire something more than literally remove her out of the delight that she's in and, patiently enjoying the process of getting to know the purpose of her existence and God kind of feeding it to them in the time that he best sees fit. she just like, jumped ahead to desire to get something more. And when I think about that, how I used to move, that's what I think about, that I didn't even understand. I wasn't even using what God had already established for me to use that as, right, being forthright and having a presence, because the home that he had already created for me, both physical, but also, like the physical house that I have and live in, but also the home that my husband and our relationship and the marriage provided me. I should have brought all of that, I should have brought all of that to those auditions, but I wasn't, because of that battle and that struggle that we're talking about tonight with, swinging from striving for perfection and how that feeds into feelings of not being good enough and things like that. So hopefully, in the way that I articulated tonight, in the way I expressed it, that, we're at the top of the new year and you can go into all the spaces that are yours and get all of the blessings that God has already destined for you here, and boldly go, out of those spaces, whether it's you knowing, or you delighting in every step of the process of knowing who you are, and seeing the beauty of how that unfolds, and learning new aspects of yourself, and ways that you can kind of show up in the world. Or it could be, like I said, maybe the support system that you have. Maybe it's your husband, maybe it's your wife, maybe if you're not married, it's just a family member or a friend that you have, that though you want to go into diving heavy into whatever plans that you have set before yourself, in that way, and say, God, I'm ready. I'm excited. I'm open to experience those just right experiences and meet my just right people. And the last thing I'll say is that once you kind of rest in and delight in that space of knowing who you are and enjoying that journey, I think one of the other things that have helped me to be able to not only, be able to have a good, great relationship with my husband, as well as to, pursue some of my dreams in a way where, I can go out, I can take the risk, I can be courageous and boldly do those things, is that understanding that, yes, you have value and you have things to offer the world. And there are billions of us here. So it's okay. You might not be reaching all, right? All 8 billion of us here. And I think that's okay. I always have the saying that I say, that there's no rejection. It's just redirection, right? And so understanding that, even though in that process of delighting in discovering who you are and knowing what that is and doubling down on it and boldly going out into the world to offer it, you are extending it to others. And the others that you extend it to, they also have the right and the opportunity to either receive or say, no, I don't really find that to be that valuable to me. And that does not diminish your worth. That doesn't, it should not derail who you are. It's just that that person is not a part. It's not your audience. It's not your tribe. And that's okay, because there's 8 billions of us. So there is enough in the pot to go around, to find those who are for you and who say, man, exactly what you are saying, exactly what you're doing, that's exactly what I need in the moment that I need it. It's a just right match, it's a just right match. So I think that also definitely will help in the process. So I'm going to give it a moment, and I feel so bad because if you guys were communicating with me in this session, I could not see your comments. So I apologize for that, guys. I apologize for that. But it's okay. It won't be the last time. And then when I get off, I will definitely, troubleshoot to make sure, because I do want to engage with you guys. It's the best part of this for me, outside of doing what God's will is and what he told me to do. Second is doing what he told me to do with the people that I honor and I'm appreciative of. So definitely want to get that fixed and together. So I promise I will definitely double down on that to make sure I can engage with you guys. All right. But feel free in the places like YouTube and Twitch, where I keep the full videos to flood my feed, put your comments there, and even on Instagram and Facebook where the snippets of the video will be there. If you hear anything that resonated with you that you like, if you have any topics that you'd like me to discuss or relationship questions, please feel free, flood my feed. Let me know what your thoughts are. And hopefully this gave you some inspiration and motivation to go and get what's yours. And most importantly, just do what God has purpose and put you on this earth here to do, whether it's in your career, in pursuit of your dreams, and most definitely in the most fundamental place, which is your family. All right. But I have enjoyed talking to you guys, enjoyed being on here today, and I will be back on Sunday with another relationship scenario Sundays. And if you want to hear more from me, you can go to, I don't use Patreon, but I do use Buy Me a Coffee. My whole website has a lot of snippets, a lot of articles. And if you want to dive in even deeper to get things that are tailor-made to your situation, I have a group coaching membership on that site. So feel free to check it out. If you're on Instagram, check the link in my bio. If you're on YouTube and Facebook, check the description, as well as on Twitch. All right. But you guys have a wonderful night, and I will see you guys soon. Happy, blessed, fulfilling New Year. Until next time. All right. Bye.